it last week, but today, Lord's Prayer, just simply, let's think about these words. Give us this day our daily bread. That's what we're gonna start leading into, and we of course want to hear everyone's thoughts. We just hope to spark some thoughts. We're not here to teach.
When we think of this, it's something that we all say so often every Sunday since many of us have been small. What do we think of when we say that part of the prayer?
Sustain us.
Sustenance.
Whether it's physical with bread or whether it's in other ways.
I guess in much the same way as the first week we talked about us and our daily bread, the community.
Yeah, I think of not just bread, but basically all our entire world's physical needs, as opposed to their spiritual needs, but maybe it's spiritual too. But I've always thought of it as take care of us for our physical things that we need. You know, God takes care of the birds of the air. Take care of us too.
Yeah.
Because
But then again, there's the alternative. What if we don't have sustenance? We can't survive without that.
I can't hear you.
I said, and then there's the alternative. What if you don't have a daily bread? Because we need bread and community to survive.
Oh,
And
yes.
so that's the thought of what if we didn't have it? And how about those who don't have it?
Yeah, I always think of all those people too, when I say, give us.
We think of it individually and also collectively.
I'm sorry?
Individually and also collectively.
Yeah,
Sustenance and nourishment for ourselves and the world.
That word us is critical in that.
I think of it as give the world the ability to produce what we need for our daily sustenance. And that the crops are producing, the cattle are producing, whatever it is that we do on a normal day. The world can be physically providing it to us.
So far, the first petitions that we've been talking about are all directed toward God as Father, and or parent or creator. We talked about this last week, but this phrase takes a different tack, so to speak. So starting with give us this day our daily bread, there's a turn toward ourselves, we as the petitioners. And so it would be give us this day our daily bread.
Well, after give us this day our daily bread,
forgive us.
Forgive us.
Forgive us.
Yeah,
Our
that's
debts, we forgive our debtors.
and lead us not into temptation. Okay,
Mhm.
so those would be the next three I drew away.
I think it's invoking us, it's asking, it's not, it's inviting us or it's encouraging us to live our lives in this world with our physical needs in a way that's consistent with, you know, maybe then going up to the other place, or hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, making that kingdom happen. So giving us this day, our daily bread, is we can't take a day for granted. We can't take our food for granted. We have to work for these things.
And the acknowledgement also that it's needed and
It's needed,
necessary, yeah. So this is our phrase.
So we looked into as much as we could these last months here. The meaning of the word, how it's used, of course, in the Old and New Testaments, and maybe what it meant to the people at the time who first heard it from Jesus himself. And so, you know, many things that were predicted by the prophets. We thought this was interesting. You know, how the people of the community, use that word bread, what did it mean symbolically and in real everyday life? So probably something that they would refer to from the Hebrew Bible a lot when Isaiah said, "Oh, everyone that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, come ye, buy and eat. Yea, come buy wine and milk without money and without price." So again, like we're already onto, this community was lost in the wilderness. And of course, food and drink was the first thing they had to think about every day. When it came to them, it was at one point manna from heaven, and God provided for them. So it was, I think, every single day of their lives, giving thanks for having enough to eat.
You know, this reminds me of our current situation in our country, that look at all the food pantries and the free meals for people who are homeless and don't have money. And it's rather staggering. I wonder how many millions of people are partaking of these things, these offerings. They have to. Some of them maybe don't, they don't use their money correctly. I mean, they could, they buy things that are foolish and with other people think is foolish. But this is so much the case now in the United States and probably other advanced countries too. Industrialized countries.
That's an even broader perspective. Thank you. As Americans, I mean, I guess we hear about the poorest of the poor here might have enough to eat. Maybe a lot of people are overfed and just undernourished, people who live in a food desert in the city who can only get to not a real grocery store, but eating junk food at best. But then there's the rest of the planet who, yes, actually they're starving. They need any kind of food.
But I think most of us here are thinking about our income. But for example, my husband came from Mississippi, and I spent a lot of time down there. And my sister-in-law, who worked in a shirt factory, and she passed away a couple of years ago at age 92, but her salaries were like $30 a week, $40 a week. So she was paying into Social Security. And I mean, there were thousands of people in the factories in the South and the wood factories in North Carolina. When you think of the farmers, they were not declaring very much income, so their Social Security is not very high. And it was difficult to save money. And look at inflation. Inflation now is incredible. Absolutely. It's always kick the can down the road. We have like this 1 to 2%, maybe 3% time inflation over the time. I don't know exactly when this began, but it really it is. I don't think anybody realizes how really serious this is, because she was living on her income was practically nothing, and the prices keep rising 1 or 2% every year. I think there's an incredible number of people, and maybe the military salaries too. You hear about the military families, how difficult it is to pay for housing. So if you don't own your own house free and clear, it's a very difficult situation. As someone was saying to me the other day, they don't teach how to manage in schools, American schools. And this might have been, they don't teach in American schools how to manage your money. And that is, so since, in
They do
1900,
do sure, apparently.
well.
No, they actually do. It's called consumer education. It's a state
But we're
requirement.
probably the last people.
In 1900, which was 123 years ago, 96% of Americans lived on a farm. 96% of Americans. So they had a husband, their food supply, and they all know how to work, and they all had a support group, an emotional support group on stuff. It's gone a long time.
Well, point well taken, though. I mean, there are many people who are struggling to make ends meet.
Can I just jump in with a statistic?
Please.
Since I'm online, I quickly asked Mr. Google, and it turns out that in 2021, approximately 53 million Americans went to food banks. So that gives you an idea of the number of people who, at least on some occasion in that year, needed extra food and couldn't afford to buy it.
I guess this is also making me think, we're ad libbing.
Yes.
But, you know, we always talk about being church and seeing God in each other, and it's just a good reminder, to contribute to these food pantries and to do what we can as we're able to take care of our brethren, our brothers and sisters who aren't able to, manage on their own, even at the basic level of having enough food.
You even find that here though, in this broader area like the North Shore Senior Center, they have 30-35 social workers. And there's a lot of older people who had, let's say they were salespeople at Marshallville or something like, you know, or they even had factory jobs. But with inflation, their income, their savings, their social security is really not providing enough for them.
True. And plenty of people who just
Right
can't live off of their wages.
Northfield, Glenview, it's tiny homes and tiny apartments, plus the immigrants.
Yes.
Kind of dandy case point taking off on that, I mean. The white nationalists, Christians talk about being a Christian nation, well. What about feeding the poor and taking care of the poor, isn't that exactly what a Christian is supposed to do, and what is the role of government versus our individual roles in terms of meeting that obligation, especially if we're a Christian nation?
Imagine talking to let's say a white supremacist about, well, you know, Jesus was a socialist. Oh, he was a communist, actually, and then run.
You know,
Right?
And I noticed something here,
Oh, yes.
by wine and milk, it doesn't say drink water. Remember, the water probably was polluted, it probably wasn't very safe, so they drink a lot of wine.
Yeah.
The right-wing Christians, are not gonna drink any milk.
I feel the same,
Okay, yeah.
I try to stay away from water.
Life is hard, isn't it? I've got lactose problems lately, I just don't want to.
Yeah, right.
But that's a good reminder. I was thinking when I first read this, wine and milk, when this was written, wine and milk were luxuries for the rich, weren't they? I mean,
I don't
No,
think so,
I-
not
No, I
necessarily.
don't think so.
oh, okay.
Well, everybody had cows or they, you know.
Yeah.
Goats.
Or
well,
goat
not-
milk.
Not everybody, but.
Mhm.
And also, you know, my mother came from Czechoslovakia. It's her birthday today, or what is her birthday? And that's why they put it on all for her. But, you know, the reason they were drinking beer in Europe is because the water wasn't always that pure.
Yeah.
That, you know, pure. And so, yep. And even when they came to America.
They had
it was-
beer tanks along with the armies in Europe in those days, they drank beer rather than.
And that's
Okay.
why the Italians and the French were drinking wine.
This is great.
I guess the water was better in England.
Going
Well, they had
on ships too, they had.
Yeah.
Ale.
You're
They had
right.
this one
It's
had
straight up one.
really water.
Great.
Right.
So we've actually got a lot to get through.
Oh, well, we could go on for.
We should, but we're gonna at least share some more of this, so.
We haven't talked about inflation and its effect on food.
Yes, well, just in case everybody, I'll read through it, maybe not pronouncing it right, but so now here in the New Testament, and there's obviously many examples, if you ever want to just scan through where the word bread or food or hunger comes up in Mark chapter 9, and he commanded them to make all sit down by companies upon the green grass, and they sat down in ranks by hundreds and by fifties, so he drew a pretty big crowd. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven and blessed and break the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before them, and the 2 fishes divided he among them all. And they did all eat and were filled. And they took up the 12 baskets full of the fragments and of the fishes, and they that did eat of the loaves were about 5,000 men. And straightway he constrained his disciples to get into the ship and to go on the other side before unto Bethsaida, while he sent away the people. So again, it's one of his most famous, of course, one of the famous miracles of turning a few, fish and loaves of bread to feed thousands of people. What were they all gathered for there in the first place? To hear his message? Were they just really hungry? Both. But food is the main reason he came to them that day, as I read it.
I think they came for both, to hear the message. But I have a story about this. Back when Randy Mangus was our choir director, and we were rehearsing a little church one night. And there were about 25 of us, and he had a paper bag and showed it was empty. And then he had people put 5 little objects in there. I think maybe it was around Halloween. And he said, we're gonna pass this around and everybody is going to take one object out of the bag for themselves. The little present. And so they passed the bag around and among these 25 people. And I was one of the, near the last to take something out. Those little toys, I don't want to, Cracker Jacks or something. But why was there enough for 25 people, 20 to 25 people, when we saw him put in, they put in exactly 5 objects? Why was that?
It's a miracle.
No, yes, but why?
Learn not to take too much.
They multiplied.
Yeah, but how? How did they multiply? How did it all multiply?
Very awesome.
Yes, but I'm not getting an answer.
Well,
We learned it.
I know, but what? Well, you're all extremely intelligent, well-educated people. Why was there enough?
I can never explain
Everybody.
any magic trick, but it was magic.
There weren't any things in the bags beforehand, right?
Nothing. And they put in
They
5
must
objects.
have disintegrated, or they must have broken up the little pieces.
No, come on.
What?
What's the answer?
I don't know.
I can't believe that you're not.
Call Randy, see
No.
if we can.
But why? And this is the essence of this, which has a.
People kept contributing their own.
Yes, yes, there were people who were contributing more, so there was enough for everybody.
I mean, they were putting things into the bag.
yes,
Yes.
they took one, but they brought a few more than that.
Yet there were other people who were contributing.
So that's what I like about this is, this story is, why were they there? You can take it figuratively or literally that, Jesus was feeding them with his words. With
Spiritually.
Yeah, spiritually, and so I guess in that sense, and people were all there communing together, contributing their own perhaps, so. That's what I like about this story is it embodies that sense of people taking care of each other and being fed, from above as well.
But we can't take it literally. We have to take it, we have to really think it through intellectually.
So now
I guess I'm not gonna do that.
we're gonna get a little intricate with language. So starting with, the verb, the petition give. Here's what I learned, in Matthew 6:11, the form of give us this day our daily bread is, the verb in the Greek is, how do you say that, didomi?
I think so.
Okay,
Didn't.
didomi, in Matthew's form is dos, which is an aorist imperative give. And in Greek, the aorist tense in the indicative mood is often, though not always, a way of expressing an action that's accomplished in the past. So when it's conjugated in this imperative mood, it conveys a complex connotation, an action regarded as a single unified event. So let's go to the next one. So if we're interpreting it that way, one requests decisively once and for all a gift in its wholeness. All of the petitions in Matthew's version of the Lord's Prayer are cast in that sense. give us something, in and of itself, as a whole, just one, a single prayer, in other words. But
Sure.
another time that, the prayer comes up in Luke, his conjugation is in the present imperative, and that is, let me just advance my own slides. Do. And that, in that sense, the idea of give is like continuous, to keep giving.
So it's not a one-time thing, it's a state of givingness.
Yeah. And so if one prays the prayer along Luke's line, one is asking for a gift with the understanding that we keep asking for it.
As in, our daily bread, this is something we pray for daily.
Yeah, so like, the single request in the moment, but then also the daily request. That we need to look to God to meet our needs.
Or to each other.
Right. I like that. So whichever way you interpret it, or think about it, or say it, there are two important considerations. And one is that we beseech as a gift that which is not in our power to provide for ourselves. And the one, we're making the entreaty to God.
It kind of reminds me of what JS was saying about being able to, the agricultural aspect and the whole world being able to work together to deliver this, with God kind of overseeing all of that and providing for the ability to produce our daily needs.
Yeah.
So we looked at some secondary sources as well. This is not just our, biblical interpretation directly, but we had some help. Yeah, there's a lot out there. We'll give you some references. This one book, Alan lent us, which I'll share. And for those folks at home, this book is called Lord Teach Us, the Lord's Prayer and the Christian Life. And it's amazing. There's a lot to be said here. So they've done a lot of research and looking at, things like the Greek and the Aramaic, originally, of course. What do these words mean at the time? And looking into the Old Testament, from which, all of this came through the Hebrew Bible. Daily bread. A lot of people have seen this in the Aramaic at the time, meaning daily used to mean just give us enough. Just give us what we need for now. That's what daily meant to these people, according to a lot of these scholars. And so, going back to Exodus, and one of Moses' stories, when God gave the wandering Israelites manna, it fell from heaven. They expected only to gather just as much as they needed for that day. And here's the quote, just right out of Exodus 16:4. Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. So the Old Testament, way of looking at things was, this is just another test for the Israelites at the time. I'm here for you, but don't, take everything, because I'm here to test you. Just share, take what you need right now. Don't rob the earth of all of its, fruit.
On the other hand, the Bible is full of contradictions.
Yes.
In the story of Abraham and Joseph and the Egyptians, Joseph was in charge of storing enough food for 7 years forward for the great drought that was going to occur.
Yeah, but that's different than gorging yourself with all the bread that's in front of you that day. That was actually preparation.
Okay, all right, I'll buy that. So it's okay to gather up more manna, but only eat enough for that day or
Well, I
something.
don't know, I'm not a scholar in this, but just that sounds like to me.
Those are the exits, they don't have a home, they're wandering and wandering, maybe they don't have, ways to carry too much. I don't know. The time.
They certainly didn't have refrigerators.
Maybe a donkey and a cart. And so this made us think, just another way, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. Our daily bread. Okay, boring, right? We're Christians. We don't need to walk up to a high mountain and be shown a light. How do we get to, talk about Jesus and speak with Jesus and feel? We just get together and break bread together. We're gonna have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, our daily lives. So at the time, of course, not easily found, especially for the poor people. But turning a simple repeated prayer, for the mundane, everyday things you do into thanksgiving and grateful, even for things that, especially for things you might forget to be thankful for every single day.
I wasn't here for the first couple of sessions. Is that prayer, the Lord's Prayer, is that found actually in the Bible?
Yeah,
Mhm.
oh, yeah, I think, Luke, and then repeated in Mark,
Okay, in the New
Okay.
Testament.
but it's, Jesus himself saying, this, he taught them to pray, so we're
Except for the end of it, for thine is the power and the glory forever, amen. That was added by, who was the king that had 7 wives or 5 wives or whatever?
A lot of them.
That's a day.
The
going after Jesus.
King of England added that
Really?
ending, yeah, it's not in the
Henry
Bible.
VIII.
That's
And
why.
the Catholic Church
Oh,
doesn't
isn't that
say that.
interesting?
It's
No, they
unchanged.
don't.
Oh, I didn't know.
Interesting.
And if you're in the
So that's
Catholic
an
Church.
Anglican.
Yeah, that was, who was it?
Henry
Henry
VIII.
VIII?
Yeah.
Henry VIII added that.
And if you go to the Catholic Church, they don't say, it was a Saturday, or no, it's
It's
the
the
debts,
end.
the debts that become trespasses in the Catholic Church.
But so is the
Yeah,
Eastern
but we're not-
Orthodox
that's next
Church.
week.
Yeah, we'll get that for next week, how things were different, translated.
Yeah, so when I say the Lord's Prayer, I don't say the end of it because it's not the Lord's Prayer.
Well, thank you.
So just more, historically on the connotations of bread. Just to have another understanding of, why symbolically it was also an important, so important. The earliest agriculture activities began in the Middle East, where bread became a staple food that was essential for life. And it was held in high esteem by several ancient civilizations. And in Christianity, it's became one of the most important symbols. We use it in communion. This is my body broken for you. It's a divine gift and a symbol of generosity and sharing.
But why did our bread become a staple in the Middle East? Because I know you have to pound the grain, so it becomes, turned into flour when you cook it. But it's something that you keep, but that you can, is readily edible and that you can keep for a while.
Good question.
And it's something that you can carry with you on a journey and eat readily. You can't do that with grain.
That's right. So a way to turn something that just came out of the earth into something that's lasting.
And even rice you have to cook before it's edible.
And compared to maybe the Far East or Europe, in the desert, water is pretty scarce. So you got it, you're gonna make the most of it.
However, one thing they did have a lot of in the Middle East is a lot of stones to pound the grain into flour
Good
or
point.
grind it somehow.
Yeah,
They were clever, weren't they?
they had to be.
What does all of this mean for each of you now?
Thank you, great question.
Well, that we have to give bread to the poor, rather we just can't give them rice because they may not have the means to cook it.
How does this line enhance or not enhance your feelings about yourself as a Christian?
Well, I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, JS, about the obligation to share and to look after everyone. And the question of whether individual role versus government role, but yeah, it's, we have to think of everyone, not just ourselves, and not just think of them, do something about it.
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. No, today some people are out, setting up the home for the refugee family. I would say that is kind of like taking care of the daily bread, the daily needs, not just bread, but all the people.
Yeah, that's a great question. I like that, Paul, because bread is a metaphor, right? We can talk about food, and that's important, but just all of our daily necessities that some people take for granted, some people are searching hard for, and then we all can maybe just keep it in context. Now I'm just thinking as a Winnetkin, you know, when I do remember to say grace, or somebody reminds me to at home or even in a restaurant, I love when someone reminds me that we're here to just saying grace before the meal, right? I like it when someone says something to the effect that thank you for the, you know, the hands that worked on this, the farmers, the people in the kitchen right here in this restaurant who were, you know, working hard for us. Boy, let's be thankful every single day.
I like that question, JS, because you know, how you phrased it as Christians, and I think it's just also the reminder, dovetailing what Paul said, that it's one thing to have your faith and to have your beliefs, and then it's another thing to act upon them, and I'll just use the phrase again, to be church outside in the world, taking care of each other.
And this for me holds not just for this particular line, but for every line that we've studied so far in this series. What does this line mean, how does it enhance my view of myself as a Christian? And what do I feel resonates within me that I can then go and share with the rest of the world?
I don't think it has to just be Christians who do this. I think everybody needs to do this. It's not, I don't think Christians have what's the word?
Rock on it.
They don't have a lock on
Oh,
this.
absolutely not. But we're the ones who say this prayer every Sunday.
That's right. It makes me wonder, Andrea. I mean, I expect, you know, all religions, all people of all faiths around the world, we're just coming from different traditions from different times, and this is, you know, human history. And there's a lot in common, you know, the more we compare with other religions. Why shouldn't there be?
And when you say the Lord's Prayer, I mean, there's no word of Christ. I mean, maybe he said it, but there's no word of Christ. I mean, it's really, to me, kind of a universal prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if you don't believe in God, you're kind of praying to something outside yourself. I don't know, I think it's a really, that prayer, I think, really can resonate with lots of different kinds of people.
Yeah, good point. We didn't know it came from the Bible or with a Christian tradition, and we just found some tribe somewhere that had never heard any of this before
I mean,
and gave them that prayer. It would work for them. Yeah, good point.
It's fun, and just we're scratching the surface, of course. Like I said, we found out there's been a lot written about this, and NEK understood, of course, there's a lot of just the translation or the millennia of these few words could have meant different things to different people. Like you said, maybe from another tradition, instead of saying our Father, other
Our
traditions might say
spirit,
our Maker,
our great father up there, the great mother, whatever.
A couple weeks ago, I think, the idea of heaven, what does heaven mean to everybody? And some people it's an afterlife, some people it's not, but it's still something outside of ourselves.
right? Admitting there's something beyond us.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I'm sorry, Andrew, we don't really see you, but we can hear you. Any ideas or reflections for us? Sorry, I don't want to call you out, Andy, sorry.
Is he, mute?
Yeah, he's muted.
History?
More history.
It's very interesting.
Like the drawing,
Yes, that's some great
Yeah,
backup
art.
materials.
a little bit of googling here. So I also discovered that in ancient Egypt, Osiris was worshipped as the god of vegetation and revival. He taught the people how to grow wheat and to make flour and bread.
So what time are we talking about here?
Well,
Pre-Jesus?
I was thinking,
Yeah.
because just before we looked at something from Exodus, and who were they running from? The Egyptians and Pharaoh. So this is, they must have known something about the beliefs of the empire, the people who had enslaved them. And they might have shared some things like, agriculture together. So this is just maybe, background of the time of the Hebrew Bible.
The Greeks also held bread in high esteem alongside with wine and oil. It was a product of civilization.
It'd be nice to have someone play the flute for you while you're cooking.
I like that.
Nice image.
Yeah.
That's great.
Staff of life. Not
They
sure
have
what
to
that
meet in
means.
time with the music.
I don't know.
Stick with the beat.
They're part of
The musician.
They're the drummers.
That's what happens at my house every evening at 6.
Grinding the weeds.
And the people looks like a loaf of bread, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a great piece of art.
How old do you think that piece of art is?
The 6th century,
BC.
yes.
And those figures are still intact, maybe they had to put them in together, but that's a highly detailed piece of sculpture. So you can tell it was, it was made in separate parts and then somehow fastened together.
Yeah, maybe.
Is the one standing on the left playing the flute?
Yeah,
Mhm.
The man is on the
That's sort of hard to see.
accompanied by a musician.
That's fascinating.
I like the man's playing the flute and the women are doing the hard work.
Of course. Nothing has
I
changed.
wondered if that was a man, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think playing the flute's easy.
It was probably more enjoyable. than
Yeah, it might have been.
meeting the director.
Yeah, maybe they ordered him to give them music
Oh, there you go.
while they were.
Yeah, it was their slave.
Well, maybe, they were kept him working, because they were enjoying the music, they wanted to stay there.
Yeah, but they didn't like his cooking, so.
Yeah. But men were always in charge.
Okay,
And then just another way that bread was precious, was that when Adam and Eve were chased out of paradise, God condemned Adam to work and earn his bread by the sweat of his brow.
Hmm.
to earn it.
So the meaning of earn has changed. So I'm more monetized than it used to be probably, or work for.
Yes, I guess before they were cast out of Eden, things were given to them, and they were given everything they needed. There was just one thing they weren't supposed to eat. Broke the rule, and then I guess that was it. You're on your own. You gotta do it yourself. Make your own food.
So, yeah, here, labor for his bread. Yeah. And then evolving from that, as well, the making of the bread, involved not only labor, but also came to, encompass expertise and technique. And a craft almost, and so bread was the perfect embodiment of this, how would you say that, Greg?
All the art and science of it all.
Yeah,
I mean, well, look at that, that's beautiful, there's a
Mhm.
1,000 different ways to make bread.
And it's so easily it's portable.
Right,
And
a staple.
we have it still with us.
As
James,
preparation for this, I found a video on YouTube of a bakery in the early morning preparing for the day and its customers. And this particular bakery milled its own flour from raw grain and then used that flour to make dough and rise. And they would make it in one afternoon, let it rise overnight. And then in the morning, they crafted all sorts of different types of loaves made from different combinations of flour. And they all looked like what's in the picture. It was amazing to watch them craft it all. And it did take a lot of expertise and technique.
yeah. What I like about, this idea is that you can even expand upon the idea of what your daily bread means to, like, beyond like food or spirituality to like art and creativity, I think, how you're fed that way as well.
I haven't, did you know that flour is actually milled in Chicago? As a teacher in Chicago, I was sent around to all these different educational programs, and once on the near north side, probably about 1100 north, I was across from this office building, but at the end, they had these trucks pulling up and they had these huge silos and they were putting something into the truck. So I was very curious. I walked across the street and I talked to the driver of one of the trucks, and he said, I'm filling this with flour and I'm taking it to Ganella bread, you know. And so because of, there's so many hotels and restaurants downtown, they know that flour right here in Chicago, like, there's Farmer's Chocolate Factory and there's a lot more chocolate. So it's really milled in Chicago, a lot of it, that grain
I had no idea.
into flour. I didn't either, but I thought I'd share this so you had something additional.
Next time, I just had a photo of the old Wonder Bread factory on the west side. That's advertising. So just a couple other ideas that just came to us as we were, had some time to think about this stuff, and the metaphors of it. Another way, I think we've already been talking about it, you guys are ahead of us on this whole metaphor, but finding the holy in the simple day-to-day life. And if you want to look, you can find it. Bread is just one of them. And many of the stories, I mean, the things he taught, not just the Last Supper, of course, but there were plenty of others. Passover seders and other meals, feeding the poor. We're just sharing a meal together. I guess at the time was a really spiritual thing. Just to have some respite from whatever the troubles of the days were. Get together, break bread together. So we're united, we're here, and we do it, a lot of churches do it every Sunday, just simply, that's communion. Communion, just bringing people together. So a great symbol of that.
For some reason, it reminds me of the Muslim faith, everyone gathering for prayers 3 times a day. And it's the sharing of that experience, I think, is as important as the actual praying, if you will.
Yes. Doing it together. And I alluded to this, just how something for the early Christians, getting together for a meal was the time to talk about this stuff. was the time to share, it was the time to actually see God. Just because it's time of thankfulness, the gratitude, look what we've got here, we're together, and we're gonna be okay, because we've got a meal to share.
It's interesting to see the element of gratitude come in with the community. It's sort of a thankful sharing with each other, that sense of appreciation.
And really traditionally in American life, in the last 150 years, well, let's say before 19, when people were on the farm more, but in small towns throughout the United States, families usually gather for dinner after church on Sunday. It's the major tradition.
True. And we didn't have time to put it all on these slides, but there was something from St. Augustine, which I didn't think this would have come so early in Christianity. But Augustine has actually some things written. I wish I could quote them off my head, but because I think of my Catholic friends, they've got to be really pious about this transubstantiation, where the bread, through a miracle every Sunday, is turned into his body. And the wine is actually, you gotta believe this miracle turns into his blood. Well, Augustine, it's just, I don't know how many, 1,000 years ago, saw it as something more than that. You don't have to necessarily buy into all the miracles themselves, but just realize that, the miracle of it all, the spirituality is just coming together and breaking bread. So it's been, thought of for a long time. Which I think I remembered, reading about or being taught in Sunday school a long time ago. But again, how, important eating together was. Right after, just 2 days after Good Friday, he was gone. And friends and people around didn't know what happened to him. And so here's what happened. Some friends were together and they didn't recognize him at first until they ate together. So Luke wrote 3 days after he was crucified. They didn't know it was Easter yet, but this was going to be the day. Some people did not know that he had arisen until the moment he ate with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. So, I don't know, I'll obviously need to read more of the scholarship on this, but did they think they were eating with someone else? They didn't recognize him as the risen Christ. Because when he, on the third day, they realized he wasn't dead, they didn't know who he was until the minute that they started eating a meal together. Then they looked, I guess, eating together gave them some new vision, and they saw, wow, he's back.
Well, because other people they knew did not break the bread and hand it to them. Probably.
Good point.
Everybody, they passed the bread around, everybody would take a section of the part of the loaf. But here he was giving to them, so that would be something that they knew him for from the past.
Good point.
Just occurs to me that it's a little strange that they would be eating with someone they have no idea who it was.
Yeah.
Was it kind of the tradition to invite the stranger into the house, or something of that nature?
Perhaps, I'll have to go back and
Always
read the
throughout the
entire
Bible,
chapter.
we see this in ancient times, when there were no hotels and motels, and that was common to invite people into your, that was an assumption that people, maybe not everybody would do that, I know, we weren't there, but. And it states that throughout the Bible.
Makes me wanna go back and read that.
Yeah, I want to read the whole thing.
Understand the context of it.
They didn't have any firearms.
But also, to me, it's also it seems like it's part of like establishing what we do for communion, as this is my body broken for you and distributed to you.
So again, like all other metaphors, it's just another one, but to me, I was surprised I had looked at it this way.
But it also
Pretty powerful.
cements the idea of sharing with everybody,
Yes.
that we must give to others.
If you need to be convinced, yes, here it is.
And this is the last time, was this the last time he was seen?
Until he rose into the heaven.
Well,
This is the same day. This is Easter.
There were other examples of him meeting with the disciples, and so it wasn't.
You mean later on, after he died,
Exactly.
after he was crucified.
Yeah,
So, Are your eyes open when you take bread at communion? Do you recognize Jesus?
No.
That's an awesome question.
It's a good question.
Thank you, JS, because the eyes could be opened. If you think about things like this,
I see it as a metaphor to look beyond ourselves.
there you go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because as a Unitarian, you know, we don't have communion. in the
Right,
Unitarian church.
of course.
But I see this as somebody's giving me something, you know, and I'm sharing with them. We're sharing bread together.
Yes. JS, maybe that's it. Maybe, you know, to be so thoughtful and open-eyed about it. It's just another opportunity to just look around and find Jesus where maybe you hadn't seen him before.
And I also see communion as we're all sharing together.
Communion can't be done alone. We're communing. So something else we found kind of recently. This is Paul writing to the Philippians. And again, I'm sorry, it doesn't feel totally out of context, but he's talking about this. I'm saying this because I'm sorry, I'm not saying this because I'm in need. For I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And I thought that was just another nice
Great
broader
verse.
view of it
Great
all.
verses. Mhm.
And it certainly does apply to this, give us this day our daily bread.
Yes. Things we're praying every day for what is sufficient, you know, what we need. Because we, you know what it's like to be in need. And I know what it's like to be really comfortable.
And of being content, not greedy.
So I hope this is memorable, like the other stuff. I don't know if we meant this to be the way to tie it all together, because again, we're just scratching the surface on stuff we could talk about for days, but I also just think of this again, kind of simply, giving thanks for this life-saving nourishment, never to be forgotten, and that communion is, yes, it's just another every day, call it a boring bit of plain bread. But perhaps, you know, to remind us on Monday that what we did on Sunday, on Monday, we can be just as thankful for every other meal that God provides, just as, you know, we get communion on Sunday.
Not just every meal,
How about that? Yes.
everything we need
Everything that
for
we're
sustenance.
Mhm.
And everything every day for life when we wake up in the morning
Mhm.
and hear the birds now. I just think what you have gathered together, you know, the segments from the Bible and other books and the pictures, it's just been very enriching spiritually. And I think people's comments, I think it's been one of the richest enrichments we've had. So I think it's been a very fine job, standing ovation.
Do donut holes count as bread?
Yes. Yes.
Everything that's made from grain.
Grateful for that. Grain with powdered sugar is good.
Just think that, you know, there's been so many moments that we've diverged into like the entire history of bread and to the entire history of the world. It's been very, very interesting. Extremely, very enriching.
Well, because you guys and we all get together to talk and learn and think together.
And share.
And share doing things. Yes.
Great conversation.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.